We are live. Good to see you today, my EOS Podcast friends. Today we have Chaney Moore the founder of CPU Emergency. We're going to talk about CPU Emergency, Airdrop Stack, what's going on in EOS right now. This is a really fun talk, so I'm excited for you guys. Chaney, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, and I'll let the audience know this is our second time to do this. We had a chat earlier, so we're very experienced now at talking about CPU Emergency. Briefly about myself, I'm a founder of CPU Emergency. I've been this initiative we geared up a few months ago, and trying to help people get used to the EOS blockchain. And I'm also a custodian for Airdrop Stack.
Great. Well, let's get into all of that because there's some really interesting nuances with the CPU and why CPU emergencies, why that's interesting. So, what is the kind of core problem with CPU right now?
Sure.
What's going on?
Actually, you know what? I just had an idea here. Actually, I was asked not too long ago to put a primer in for CPU. So maybe we take a 3-minute excerpt from this and create a little CPU primer.
Yeah.
So basically your EOS tokens give you rights to the network. You can imagine EOS as a distributed network across 21 nodes. And when you have a token, you can use it and stake it for certain system resources. And if you take one EOS, you can stake that for CPU. And that will get you a percent ownership of the network's transaction time. So if you actually go to eoscharge.io, it's a great system resource put on by EOS New York, you can see how much certain transactions will cost you. As well as there's another resource put on by Titan Labs. I can send this to you if you remind me to put on your website, put on this discussion, where you can see what the current network's CPU time is, how much one EOS will get you. So if you imagine, let's just take it down a bit. Instead of 1 billion EOS, let's assume there are 100 EOS. And Brandon owns 10 and Chaney owns 10 staked to CPU. And some people that we don't know have 30. Now, so there's 50 EOS staked to CPU in the network of 100 possible EOS. That means if I have 10 staked, I have 10/50ths of the network. I can transact 20% of the network. Same for Brandon. But if no one else is using the network, the system allows us to surge ahead, and we can use more than our fair share of the network capabilities. And that's where people actually are getting into trouble. You can surge ahead on a 72-hour basis for your staked CPU. So even though if you only have a few EOS staked, you may be able to do 100 of transactions in an hour if the network's somewhat unclogged. But then if we hit a point of constraint, and I'll talk about that in a second, your CPU time may go down from 120 milliseconds per EOS down to under 1 millisecond per EOS. And what that does is it puts people over their maximum of 100%, and it makes them where they can't actually utilize the network even to stake more EOS towards CPU. So the point of constraint, right now it's 25%. What that means is, as long as we're using less than 25% of the network, we can surge ahead to that 72-hour window I just talked about. We can use as much of the network as we possibly can, unfettered, essentially. I mean, still, if you only have 0.1 EOS staked CPU, you can only do so much, but it's 120x potentially times what it is in a constraint mode. And then once we hit that 25% level, let's say Brandon used 10 and I use 15% of the network, well, that would mean that everybody else will be constrained back to only the amount of resources that they actually have allocated. There's no more surging. The network wants to make sure that everybody has the access to their resources that they have staked. And so everybody's pushed back to minimal staked levels. That makes sense?
That does make sense. I mean, basically the concept is we have a certain amount allotted to us by staking. If the network isn't being used very heavily, then we can surge ahead or we can go beyond our capacity. But then if the network starts being used over 25%, then we have to get back to just the amount we have staked. We're not allowed to go past it.
That's it in a nutshell. That's correct.
So what happens, what happens to people? Let's say, okay, now I had these 10 EOS, I surged ahead, and now the network is being used heavily, over 25%. And now I need to come back to just the 10 that I have staked. What happens to my account? What's a real world example of how that affects me?
And this is where I think the system kind of breaks down a little bit. There's some other things we can talk about in a second, but honestly, it really negatively impacts the user for something that they didn't honestly know that they were overutilizing. So when it puts them back into that position, it could put them over 100% capacity. And I don't think there's ever really a need for people to go over 100% capacity. That's historical usage. You really should stop at 100%. But for those people, it does take up to 72 hours for your individual accounts to basically cool down. Versus, the network could unwind a little bit there and not be under constraint, which would help you get out a little bit faster potentially.
Okay, so when I start over using the network, and I'm basically borrowing CPU from other people who aren't using it. Now that gets called on. Now I have to go into this. Now I've used over 100%. And I have to wait for it to refresh. So I don't have any CPU. I can't do any transactions until that resets or refreshes or cools down.
That's right.
Which
and so that's
3 days, yeah.
That can be 3 days. That's why CPU emergency was originally created. We were seeing people starting to use the network back in August, playing really the first real user dApps that were coming out. EOS Nights, EOS Bets. We were seeing a lot of people utilizing those platforms, and then we'd see, if you recall, Block Twitter start spamming the network, and people would all of a sudden go from fully relaxed network being able to surge to under constraint. At that time, I think the constraint point was just 10%. We've upped it since then, and people couldn't do anything. They couldn't even stake for their own. So we said, okay, we need to make sure this doesn't happen. We created CPU emergency, which is an off blockchain. So when you're over 100%, you can't send any transaction, and that includes transactions to stake more CPU. And so CPU emergency is off. The front end is off blockchain. It's simply a website where you can go right now. And originally it was 0.25 EOS. To help people out. Now it's 1.5 EOS of free CPU to anybody that is actually in need. And they enter their account name off blockchain, and we do some back-end checks to make sure it'll help them out. There are a lot of cases where 1.5 EOS may not be enough. Or people will come and we have some back-end checks. We have some bots that like to come and try to get CPU, or some spammers that like to come and try to get CPU across hundreds of accounts, and we have some back-end checks there. But we help people get out of that hole if we can. If not, they can come they'll have a note that pops up, and they can come to us on our Telegram channel and get a little extra individualized service.
And that actually works really quickly. I use that service to basically, I ran over my CPU and used that service, and I came into the Telegram channel, and I was like, within 5 minutes, I was able to transact in my account. So that's a pretty effective service you guys are running there.
Thank you. And it's evolved since then. Once the network started being utilized more, we had people that were coming to ask for CPU back in August, early September. To go play nights and to go play EOS Bet. And we realized pretty quickly that we could up our CPU usage for people that needed it for EOS Bets and get a referral. People that could continue to transact on EOS Bets, they actually have a referral fee that they give a small percentage of the transactions that go through. And if they wanted to use our referral, they can get a lot more CPU and continue utilizing that. EOS Bet saw us in their Telegram and said, "Hey, that's pretty cool. We like that, and we'd like to integrate you with our website." And since that time, we've integrated with 20 dApps at this point, and we're always others are consistently reaching out to us. But everything from EOS Nights, Everopedia to Bet Dice and Fast Win and all these other sites that are coming up. You can be playing on the DApp, and if you run out of CPU, there's either a pop-up that shows up and it says, "Hey, get more CPU," or there's a button directly there, and people can continue getting CPU directly from the DApp.
So that's an interesting layer. So so you guys are providing it to the users so they can continue playing the game. So it benefits the DApp. So the DApp is then rewarding you with a referral fee. Is that kind of how that works? Keep for greasing the transaction wheels.
That's essentially it's a referral fees are things that the DApp are already offering. Mm-hmm. So it's not anything special to us. It just is a way for us to be motivated to grant CPU to other users. So I did a quick check before we came on here. In the last 28 days, we've delegated over 600,000 EOS of CPU across 16,000 requests. Wow. And I said we have back-end checks, but then we've also denied user requests for various reasons. About 40,000 requests against those 16,000 that we did honor. So there's a lot of reasons that we don't give certain people CPU. Some people will come through and spam every affiliate it never has played it. They want to go out to Nudex and do some trading or do some other things, and so they don't quite qualify.
Interesting. So I see that. I mean, the incentives line up so good with the DApps. That's pretty cool how that works out for everyone. What about when you initially started CPU Emergency and you were just doing? Was it just a project to help the community?
Yeah, it was. It really was. It was. My two partners and I honestly didn't have any expectations to monetize the project. It was just a community endeavor to try to ensure that EOS gets mass adoption, and we were seeing a lot of people that were negative and really sore that they couldn't utilize their accounts and didn't understand why their account needed CPU. It's a lot different than paying gas on ETH or NEO or other blockchains to do a transaction. And just a lot of misinformation, and we wanted to help people out too. So really a philanthropic endeavor to help the community. We just saw an opportunity and pivoted a little bit there and changed it. And we continue to look for other alternatives. Well, a little over a month ago, we had a DApp that during a crunch, actually their contract stopped operating because they ran out of CPU, and they came to us and said, "Hey, we really need a short-term delegation of CPU to get back up and running. Can you help us?" And so we became a over-the-counter CPU really trading platform. So now we have a book of business where we have 3 million EOS of CPU currently leased. We have, since we already have integrations with all these dApps, they trust us and know that we are professional. And we have a lot of other individuals that have unused resources, unused EOS that were just sitting in their accounts, not gaining any interest. So we're basically acting as a escrow agent or over-the-counter leasing agent, if you will, to help people with EOS, large amounts of EOS. We're talking about hundreds to up to 1 million plus EOS. Match them with dApps that may have a need, and it's been very successul.
Yeah. So, how does that compare with something like Shintai? I know that that's what Shintai is also for, but it's not over the counter. But dApps go to Shintai and lease so that they can run their operation. What are the differences between what you're doing and what Shintai is doing? Yeah,
there are quite a few, honestly. So there are some positives and negatives to Shintai. It's automated, so hey, you can if you see a lease out there you want to take, you can snatch it up immediately, and vice versa. one of the problems is from an owner perspective, you're sending your tokens away to a smart contract. You're losing your care, custody, and control. With us, we're just telling the token holder where to stake the EOS. It never leaves their wallet. Never have to worry about losing, trusting somebody else with your EOS. The other thing, one of the other things that's pretty cool is that the contracts could roll over. So let's say we have a weekly contract. That contract, without automatically unstaking for 3 days, we can roll that contract over, and we've done that. We have some contracts that were a week-to-week contract that we're on week 6 or 7 right now. So they never lose that 3-day unstaking period, yet they're getting the benefit of a weekly rate. You don't, right now, I don't believe, I think they're working on it, but I don't believe Chaney supports or has supported all airdrop snapshots. If you think about it, certain airdrops have snapshots where you receive the airdrop token weeks or months after the snapshot. So I'm not sure they supported all those. I don't know, like say for the seed airdrop here recently, I don't know how they reacted to that or things of that nature. So that could be a little tricky. And then certainly for whales and or BPs or anybody that really has a vested interest in who they vote for, Chaney is now creating a proxy that will be a little bit more spread apart. They have some individuals that are working on their proxy committee. But still, if you're a BP or you're a whale that supports a BP, certain BP, your vote may not go to the candidates that you want to go to if you send your tokens to Chaney. And then finally, the book of business isn't really broad. It's pretty thin. So let's say a DAP wanted to lease 200,000 EOS on a monthly basis. That supply just isn't there in that large of an order. You get some pretty thin 100, 200, 1,000, 5,000, 20,000 at different levels. But you're going to be hard driven to find somebody supplying you that much on Chaney.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so if you're looking for 500,000 EOS, you're going to burn through the beginning of that order book and start paying some pretty high prices on Chaney.
That's right. If you go look at it, you get up to a very high APR pretty quickly once you burn through the first few levels.
Interesting. Yeah, and then on the leasing end, I mean that being able to continue to hold the EOS in your wallet does have a lot of benefits. I mean, the voting and the airdrops is huge. Okay. So it seems like Chaney maybe if a kind of a smaller DApp just needs like a stopgap to push their project through for the next few months as they're scaling. But once something gets to maybe the bet dice type of level, that it seems like really over the counter is the solution.
Yeah, once you need a few 100,000 or more, you need to just keep your eyes open for other alternatives. I know there have been some pretty big leases or orders that have gone through, but it's a rarity.
Yeah.
So Rex will probably change everything. I know that the Rex code is out there. I have not had a chance to look at it. So I hope that it's different from Chaney a bit, from the standpoint that I hope you can just stake your tokens directly to Chaney from any wallet. And including that, you can be able to vote from there, which, if they do make that a little bit easier for people and they don't make people worry about rates and they throw in the system resource fees for RAM trading and the name rights and things of that nature, I think that you'll see a lot more people including Block One, potentially putting their EOS and CPU into Rex, and that should blow the market wide open, honestly.
Yeah. Can you dig into that a little bit? Them adding the system resources from the name auction and other places, and how that will affect the price of possibly affect the price of RAM CPU?
Sure. Well, on RAM, it won't do anything, I don't think, for the cost of RAM. But you see, there's a 0.5% trading fee on RAM anytime someone goes out and buys or sells RAM, I believe. So that right now is just sitting out there in an account doing nothing. They probably, my guess is once we have a referendum, we can't actually do anything with those those fees until we, as the EOS community, vote to do something with those. But my guess is we'd probably burn those initial fees that are currently sitting there and then apply future fees into the recs. But that's yet to be decided. Then you have the naming fees. I think it's the same thing. It's a half or 1%. No, I'm sorry. All the naming fees go into the system as well. So anytime someone buys a premium name, that amount is just collected in EOS, and it's just sitting in an account right now. No one has access to it because we can't decide what to do without referendum. So if you throw those fees into into REX, on top of the fees that will accumulate there due to the Bancor algorithm, we'll see. I'm not sure what the return will be, but it'll probably be enough to entice people that aren't willing to put their money into Shintai. It should be able to entice them. They'll put their EOS in REX.
Okay, so we have these fees, these fees that EOS is generating from these different areas. They're going to be in REX, and then what's the incentive? How do you think they'll use those to incentivize people? You're saying that they'll pay higher returns for people to stake and lend?
So right, the Bancor algorithm is kind of what drives the RAM fees as well, if you'll recall. So it's going to depend on the supply and demand. It's basically the supply of EOS CPU can never be fully eaten up by demand. It approaches infinity. It's a nice little curve that slides up towards infinity the more it gets used up. So the more CPU that gets put into the account, it's just going to stay flat. The fee is going to be pretty slow until we reach a certain point. It's going to start creeping up, then it'll go parabolic if we ever have too much demand. And that'll probably never happen because everybody will throw their EOS into the CPU account to get that return. So what they're going to do is, in addition to that CPU fee, I'm guessing, they talked about it. Dan has put this in his post. We assume this is going to happen. There's no guarantees. Is that they will put the either monthly, weekly, or daily, I'm not sure what rate, put the premium name and RAM trading fees into that account as a sweetener on top of the lease fees for people that will actually stake their REX to CPU, or stake their EOS to REX for use as CPU.
Okay, so it's a sweetener. It's an extra incentive for people to actually stake there. They'll be getting their lease fees plus possibly some sort of small bonus from that from all the fees that have been accumulated.
Correct.
Makes a lot of sense.
We didn't talk about earlier. I honestly think that Block 1 and maybe Dan messed up, in the way that the system was started at Genesis. So let's say, we just talked about how when you're under constraint, it looks at how everybody has, who all has EOS staked for CPU, and it constrains everybody back to based on what that percent is. Well, if you think about the way we started the network in Genesis, 50% of all the tokens were staked to CPU automatically. There are accounts out there, including 50 million EOS in Block 1 staked to CPU, that have never, ever touched their accounts and aren't utilizing that. So it's just a system resource that is being, when we're under constraint, it's a system resource that they are allocating to themselves, but they're not intending to use it. Hopefully when REX comes on, they'll either allocate those to REX, or hopefully they'll unstake at some point. They figure out that what they're doing to the system. But there are also well accounts out there, if you think about it, that have it staked to CPU. They never touched it. There are people out there that are using it and staking it to CPU, not to use the transactions, because they have to stake it somewhere to go out there and vote. They don't plan to use this, but they want to vote. They want to be good citizens. We had to get to a certain threshold of votes when we started the network. Everybody had to vote, so they had to have it staked. And then in addition to that, you've got people that see staking EOS, again, to CPU as a security measure, right? It's there for 3 days. I'll get alerts from EOS Authority. If something happens to this account, I can go in there and stop it. It's a security measure. But what that does in addition is it allocates those resources, those accounts that they really don't intend to utilize there. So we've kind of hurt ourselves in this manner, or block one, the way it was set up, has kind of hurt the actual users of EOS by setting it up in this manner.
Yeah, we've got, millions and millions of unused resources that are staked with the CPU out there. That's an interesting point.
You need to start a new initiative called Free My CPU, and get people to move it over to net or do something else with it.
Yeah, so Rex is kind of the solution to that, though, because it gives these people a place where they can stake and also vote and lend out their CPU and everything.
Passive income is a strong motivator, so hopefully it works out.
Yeah, it's a beautiful driver, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as that's kind of the CPU side of things. Let's talk about more of the RAM side of things, and because you're part of Airdrops DAC, can you just tell people what Airdrops DAC is, first of all?
So Airdrops DAC is a new initiative really to help projects airdrop their tokens in a manner that is a cost-efficient and resource-efficient way to get it out. So Airdrops DAC is actually the largest owner of EOS RAM right now, and so we have developed, or I say we, I had no, I'm not a developer, I'm not a coder, I don't know how to go out there and do this. It was actually Nathan at Generos who developed a mechanism. I believe he coined the skyhook, where you can actually airdrop tokens to somebody and give them a certain amount of time to either grab the tokens, interact with the contract, send the tokens, utilize the tokens, whatever the case may be. But any action you associate with that token contract writes the RAM into your own RAM. You pay for the RAM, you cover the cost of that token. It's about 200 bytes of RAM. It's a fractional amount in terms of EOS these days. And what that does is it frees up the person's RAM to airdrop that to you. And then if that person doesn't interact, they can skyhook, they can bring those tokens back, free up the RAM, because if you don't technically own the RAM for the coins, you don't technically own the coins. I think the first example I saw, there was a project that was initially airdropped to everybody. Actually, didn't make it to everybody. The person that was trying to send it out got a little overwhelmed and didn't have enough money set aside for RAM and got upset. It was called CETOS, C-E-T-O-S. I think his tokens were the SETI token, C-E-T-I. And what he did is he destroyed his token contract and brought all those people that didn't have the RAM in their accounts. They just saw the SETI tokens evaporate, which was most of us, because there were no place to trade them at that time. There were no decentralized exchanges. This was back in June or July. And so it's very similar to that. I mean, if you don't own the RAM, you technically don't own your tokens. And so what they did is, the first example they did is they actually created a ZKS, which is a 3-hour CPU leasing, essentially, token. They created that just as a proof of concept and sent that out to everybody for a 30-day period. People that interact, they skyhook it back, and they're going to send it out again, I believe, here shortly. So it's basically a way for dApps to send their tokens out to users in a very cost-efficient manner, because the RAM isn't sitting out there for years waiting for it to be returned. We do it in over a period of months. We try to make sure that we get the word out to all the token holders, and we also help them review their token economics and what their thoughts are for how they plan on sending the tokens and distributing the tokens, as well as a little bit of an incubator that could be associated with that as well if they need that help.
Okay. So on the user end, let's say on my end, when I receive an airdrop and I see it, it pops up in my wallet and I see, oh, okay, I've got this, I just got this airdrop.
Right.
What you're saying is that I actually don't own that airdrop because I haven't used the RAM yet. And so I can see that airdrop, but I have to basically make a transaction within my wallet somewhere before I can actually claim those.
You by moving the tokens, really, any any interaction with the token, moving the tokens, selling the tokens. You can do air grabs. You can go to eostoolkit.io, and most of the air grab tokens are out there, the ability to air grab. It's just anything that interacts with the token address will write that RAM. So you're right. If you have an alt account, you can send one EOS to or one token to the other alt account, and that will do it as well.
Okay. And on the people doing the airdrop end, that RAM, if they were to send it out, let's say they airdrop and it lands in my wallet and I do nothing, that utilizes the RAM on the airdrop team's end until I do something. So it's this RAM kind of stuck in nowhere there.
That's exactly right. So it's their RAM, their costs. It doesn't get returned to them until such time as you interact with it. So that's why really it can be cost prohibitive in some cases for these projects to send out airdrop tokens to hundreds of thousands of accounts out there, because it does cost 200 bytes or so per account. So every 5 accounts, you have to have a kilobyte of RAM.
Okay. And then that's where the skyhook comes in, is that if they don't use it, if they're not doing some activity on their end, you can pull the RAM back.
Right. So you think about what, and I've been a big fan of airdrops and tokenomics for a while. I had an airdrop tracking spreadsheet for a long time before I got so busy with the CPU emergency that was used by the community a lot. But dApps want interaction. They want involved and active communities. They don't want to airdrop their tokens to competitors or to really, necessarily to exchanges that aren't going to distribute their token. They don't want people drop it, honestly, to people that are going to dump it either. But they want to have a community. They want to have a buzz around their tokens. They want to have involved people that are invested and excited about their project. So if you send a token to somebody and they don't interact with it for 2, 3, 4, 5 months down the road, potentially years down the road, that's not who your core target is. You want somebody that's going to be active. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, from the business side, you definitely want some sort of barrier to entry. You don't want to just give people something for nothing, because then it almost has no value for them. It's just something they're going to dump or forget about. So
people complain about there's friction there. Oh, there's friction. It's trouble. People will never do it. Well, from the dApp's perspective, they're giving away a significant portion of their project's value. And if you're not willing to take 1 or 2 minutes out of your time to endure that friction and actually, you don't know about their project, you don't care about their project, and should you be getting a significant portion of their value. So I love airdrops. I really enjoy the metrics. I really enjoyed this latest the seed FOMO that's kind of geared up here with their airdrop. They airdropped 1,000 to anybody that registered, and then on top of that, anybody that accumulated more over that time got depending on how much you accumulated, you got 2, 3, 5, 6x on top of that airdrop. So it was really kind of a neat methodology, and they're going to keep doing that. So there's different ways you can do it to create excitement around the project, but that's what they want.
Yeah, and it's cool how it's evolved so much. Like in the very beginning, it was literally an airdrop on every account, just kind of shotgun effect, and all these different angles of continue. Every new airdrop that comes out, they're doing something a little bit different, a little tweak. It is a really fun thing, especially with thinking about the tokenomics and the different incentives and all of that. It is really interesting. It is.
It's a lot of fun if you have time to keep track of it, and that's where some of the feedback is. I don't have time, and that's true. There are a lot of good projects out there these days, and it is hard to keep track. I've got, I think I'm up to about 200 different Telegram channels. It feels like right now. It's hard to keep track of everything, but I try my best.
Yeah, the Telegram. Yeah, it's Telegram is an amazing tool. It's also a lot of information going on there. Looks like we So Mentioning that, how hard it is to keep track, you had what is kind of a famous airdrop spreadsheet, because I knew about it back in the day, and I think that a lot of people use it because it was a really cool tool, because like you said, it's like a full-time, each little niche is its own full-time job to keep track of, and it gets overwhelming. So you don't do the airdrop spreadsheet anymore, but
it's hard to find the time. Yeah. So if you want to help me out, or anybody listening to this podcast would like to take ownership of that spreadsheet, it really hasn't been updated since probably end of September, and it was a valuable tool for the community. And if someone would like to help take that on, I'll turn over the passwords and give them the keys of the kingdom, and they can help manage that. But it's just a time issue for me right now. I think it's value added. The community, I always get a lot of good feedback from the community. I just don't have time to manage it anymore. So feel free to reach out to me if you think that's something that you might be willing to do.
Yeah, please someone step up and do that, because I want the spreadsheet to come back.
Yeah, we used to have airdrops for EOS and a couple of other websites, and it's just not maintained as concisely as I think it's a spreadsheet. You can see what's already dropped, what's still pending, how it's being dropped, the measurements. What are the requirements for the wallets, etc. Was there a minimum threshold, 100 EOS, whatever the case may be. So it was a good tool.
Yeah, that's one of these. As EOS continues to grow and change and everything, there's these consolidation websites that bring information into one place to streamline people's research, that are really kind of effective and important. I know the EOS Writer is a new one, another example of he's been putting together the just good information, basically videos and articles about EOS into one place, so people can kind of stay up to date on a curated news feed. So yeah, there's any type of consolidation and curation of information in EOS is important right now. So
yeah, we are truly decentralized. There's no and that is somewhat of a problem when it comes to gathering good quality information. So, we all laud decentralization and are proponents of it, but unfortunately, there are some things that actually are worse due to decentralization, and information gathering and resource in this nature are just part of that.
Yeah, it puts a lot of weight on our shoulders as far as researching on our own goes. It's a big task. So
it is.
Yeah. As far as there's been some interesting developments, let's kind of maybe shift a little bit back to CPU for a second. Dan has said that he's got kind of a fix for CPU or a change. What is that, and how's that look like?
Sure.
Affect things.
Yeah, it should be a good thing. He announced recently that basically it's a function of who's the CPU payer, and he's going to give the ability for dApps to pay for the transactions on behalf of their users. So if I'm going out and I want to play on EOS nights and revive my nights and start dungeon crawling again, EOS nights can pay for that CPU. Same for any dApp. So that would be great. That means that the burden on the little guy isn't there if the dApp has the resources to do so. So that's the big proponent. Is every dApp that comes out going to be able to pay the CPU costs for all of its users? No, probably not. Hopefully, the big ones out there will be able to afford to do so in conjunction with Rex. I think that having one without the other is not going to be a good fix, because it's going to be so costly for even BetDice and EOS Bet and all the massive dApps that are getting the big volume right now. I'm not even sure they can afford to cover their CPU costs as well as all their user CPU costs without Rex driving that price down significantly. So it's a great initiative. It's basically what Tron does. Tron, I know people may have negative opinions about Tron, but something they certainly outdid EOS on is that they took their network resources that were unutilized up front, and I believe put them to every user, so that basically users don't have to worry about that, at least right now.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of logical sense. I mean, and if you think about all the CPU that's just staked right now unused, imagine if at Genesis maybe that would have been configured differently, where instead of being staked and unused, it was made it free on the user's end.
Yeah.
But then you may have had. I wonder how's Tron deal with maybe like spamming the network or things like that for resources.
Yeah, that I can't answer you. I've just seen a few of their Telegram channels and researched a little bit about the differences there. Mm-hmm. You're right, though. I mean, that allows people to spam. But even with spam, I'm not sure that we'd be fully utilizing our network.
Yeah. I didn't have a good understanding of that. Of it, there's two separate. I mean, the users have to have CPU to use the DApp. The DApp has to have CPU to run, but the DApp can't use its CPU for the users right now.
That's right. So let's say, for example, I send a DICE transaction. I have to say, okay, I want to roll under a 96 and send 1/10 of an EOS to this contract address. So that costs me, I don't know, some milliseconds of transaction time. And then, the DApp contract will then process that request and say, okay, user, here are some of the DApp's tokens for placing that bet, and you won or lost, so here's your token back. So both sides of that have a pretty hefty cost associated with it. But right now, that's on both sides to cover those transactions separately.
Yeah, now that's a great example of where you don't want friction. That's a great example where the person's already in there playing the game and interacting, and you want to take any friction
right.
out.
You don't want them to have to stop and figure out and stake more resources, et cetera. And that's very true.
You also don't want them to stop and like reevaluate their decisions of that next.
Not from that standpoint. So so hopefully that won't be an issue going forward, and users will be able to, in certain dApps, have their CPU costs covered for them. There will still be a need for CPU emergency. It'll just be hopefully a smaller one. We want the network to succeed. There'll still be users to get over their CPU limit, need our help. There'll still be dApps that won't be able to afford to pay for their users' CPU or don't know how much they need. So we expect to still be around. Hopefully, though, we're not in such a needed position. We want the EOS IO network to succeed. We want Warbly and Telos and all these other networks to succeed. And we want as of this, I think the EOS price is hovering around 260. We want the EOS price to moon as well. And we can't do that without mass adoption. So these are fixes that need to occur.
Yeah, the EOS price is I was talking to Roshan from he's also from Airdrop Stack today, and now that it's dropped to this price, there's definitely some concern within the block producers as far as keeping their keeping their being able to keep running depending on what they're doing.
Dan posted something on Telegram a week or two ago, and I disagreed at the time. Of course, that was probably still $5 or $6 EOS. He said that BPs need to have other sources of income, and I kind of disagree with that standpoint, because I don't want their other businesses, certainly not businesses within EOS, to conflict with what their ethical standards should be for the blockchain, right? I mean, if they have something that's good for the blockchain, but it's not necessarily good for their DApp. Let's say I was a block producer, and I say, oh man, I'm making pretty good money with my refs because CPU is not doing well. I don't want to make CPU better. I'm not going to make it better, and there's a conflict right there, right? But lately, with the price of EOS going down to $2.50 or so, I don't think that any block producer could necessarily support a staff and network if they weren't in the top 10, 21. Certainly standby block producers may not be able to afford. So it's tough. We're going to may see some changes coming down the pipe.
Yeah, it does change the game a little bit when there's this real it's going to cut off a lot of the fluff, or maybe who knows what block producers each is run like its own startup. Who knows how or what they're spending money on. I mean, they're pretty transparent about it, but no one, it's like not going to go out and research all of it. So there'll be some things that may have to be cut out that maybe weren't as important as maybe it seems like when you have more capital coming in. So it's definitely going to, and there's some people, I don't agree with this, but I have seen a lot of people make the statement that block producers should just produce blocks and not worry about all this other stuff.
I've seen that too. And there are some block producers that run on that platform. EOS Metal, I believe. Yep. They have different systems, and I think there's no right answer there, but they add different values in different ways. You're going to see some people that may that 4% worker proposal fund. When you think about it, originally there was 5% inflation, 4% is going to worker proposal fund, which indications are that will likely be burned once we have a referendum. But there's nothing to stop us, except I say there's nothing to stop us. There could always be a proposal once we have a referendum to increase the block producer pay to 2% or 3%, or make sure they have a certain level of compensation to make sure that they're getting enough resources to maintain and increase the integrity of their hardware. We want to be cheap. I'm fine with that. I agree. I don't like inflation any more than the next person, but we want to make sure that block producers have enough income to be increasing their hardware and network appropriately, so we can start firing up some side chains here and making sure that ITBC works out. So it's a conflict of interest a little bit, but we need to make sure that we understand that anything we don't spend right now may bite us in the butt in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my initial take was being kind of just against any kind of block producer pay raise, and I think I'm still in that camp, but kind of open to the idea. I saw an idea of kind of a floating scale, which made me start reevaluating. Like, okay, maybe there is a way that it's logical, or the incentives are right to increase. But if because what block producers are doing is they're spending in U.S. dollars, basically, or spending in where their currency is. And so as price drops, then all of a sudden their expenditures are, a much bigger, they may be even losing money. So if the percentage was correlated to basically U.S. dollars, if it was a floating scale, and that way, if it does go back up to $10 or even $5, and where 1% is reasonable, then maybe that percentage can come back down. But when it drops down to $2, that percentage compensates. So yeah, I'm more open to a floating scale, I think.
It'll be a very tough discussion, because I'm not sure any block producers are willing to take and fall on their swords to fight for more pay. So it's going to be, it could be,
it's
their own death toll right there. They go out there and they say, "Hey, I need more money." All the votes could go somewhere else. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Hopefully the price rebounds. We'll see some sort of crypto winter end here and see a spring revitalized, and we won't have to worry about that. But what's bad for the BPs and bad for the investors is good for the devs, though. So right now, developers can accumulate some pretty relatively cheap EOS if they want to build on the EOS network. So there is a silver lining to this very dark cloud over our heads. So it's not all negative. Hopefully, right now, some devs and some projects are accumulating some EOS. They have enough resources set aside.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like this, it's a really complicated ecosystem with so many angles that to try to tweak and judge. And I'm would be more of a hands-off approach. Like if we don't know what's going on, like maybe we shouldn't try to manipulate too much. It makes me think of the Federal Reserve, where they want to adjust the interest rate and then claim that they know 7 steps down the road how that affects the rest of the economy. Whereas with a ecosystem that complex, there's the amount of amalgamations is just becomes infinite, and you can't really predict, So I tend to take that same approach with messing with the BP pricing, because like you said, there's these incentives where now developers are getting stronger, or they can do more. And so maybe we just, let it live and let parts die off and let new parts come in the same way that maybe like a natural system works, because that's kind of the way of the world for me. So I like to let things break and fix themselves.
Yeah. I think most people within the crypto sphere would agree with you that let free markets reign, and let's stay away from manipulation, and keep it all on the surface and above the level.
Yeah.
On the level.
And you make a pretty valid point of like the incentives for a BP to come out and really push for some sort of price increase. The people who need it aren't going to really be able to argue for it politically.
Right.
So we'll probably see it stay.
And then you're going to see some BPs that fire up a secondary BP. That was really shocking to me. I saw that recently. Hey, let's just wind up another BP and throw our extra votes there, and all of a sudden we've got two BPs kind of run to the same consortium that getting paychecks. So not too. That didn't give me the warm and fuzzies there, Brandon.
Yeah, that's the what I think that's EOS Game. Is that the name of it? Game.
Yeah,
EOS?
I think so. Something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. That is a really perverse incentive there. That does look. That does. I mean, possibly part of why the price of EOS is dropping is because people are seeing things like that. I don't know, but home market's down, but EOS is certainly one of the leaders in the top 10 for last week. So a little bit of the Dan concern possibly about the Monero EOS and his shower thoughts probably affected some of the community that didn't quite understand what he was saying and or listen to the fudsters, but hopefully we rebound here. I'm already there's no getting out of EOS at this point for me. I'm in the same boat. It's time to accumulate and wait for a rebound, I think. So yeah, Dan's Telegram channel is interesting. He actually put out a paper today,
I saw that.
Explaining himself. Is short and sweet, but basically just said that this is how I've done it. I think that Telegram is a tool to brainstorm and use the community's input, and this is how I part of how I build, and this is part of my process. Yeah. And
that is absolutely fine. Just kind of say that up front when you prognosticate about what you want to do. I have no trouble with and I love being a part of the communications and actually having some input and being able to have a discourse with Dan on Telegram. It's fun. It makes you feel like you have a say in how things are going, and love talking to BPs, etc. And he's a good guy. I think he just maybe doesn't quite understand the impact that some of his words may have from time to time. In the day, it impacted him probably more than it impacted any of us from the standpoint of how much he's got at stake here.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he's very well aware of that now.
Yeah, for sure. What would be your take on how he could approach that? Like, because there's some sort of happy medium, I think. What do you think it is?
Hey guys, I had another thought for something I can build on top of EOS, and leave it at that. It's a privacy coin, X, Y, and Z, and then you start, don't do the whole what if I told you, what if I told you, what if I told you, which is fun, but it sure leads to a lot of questions and issues, and it's who am I to play armchair quarterback? He's the one that's created all these things. I'm just enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's hard to because who knows? He's who can get in his mind. But I think that's a good point. Just a little bit of a preface saying, hey, this is like an idea that I just had. Give a little bit of a lead in, and so that people don't have to make up these magical thoughts themselves.
And you know what? It's crazy. I've seen more FUD from that one than I have in a long time, and it just amazes me that people can still come out of the woodworks and call EOS an exit scam and X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, man, they really just have an absolute hatred for the EOS project from the standpoint. I don't know if they're upset by the original proclamation that EOS would be the Ethereum killer, or they're Bitcoin maximists, or what the case may be. But there are a lot of people that just like to FUD on EOS and really don't like the project, or Dan in some cases.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that, because BTC was such like a group of free thinkers, and then as when ETH developed, it was this really another group of kind of free thinkers, and all the devs were coming on board to build on top, and it seems like the group of people who is into this would also be really open-minded to new projects and new ideas and new ways of doing things. But it's like they got something new and then thought it's the end-all be-all.
They've made a lot of people a lot of money, and people are very protective of that. How about that?
Yeah, I guess that's probably the most logical line to draw right there. It's when you got a lot of money on the line, all of a sudden things change a little bit. So, yeah, very interesting. Well, we went through CPU, we went through RAM. We kind of hit some of the current events here with EOS. So as we round up, let's round out here, finish up. Like, what do you think? What's your kind of feeling on what you see coming in 2019? Maybe what you're most excited for in 2019.
Hey, as I say, you never asked me that.
I know that's my
you missed out.
question.
I know.
Let me tell you what happened here.
Yeah.
We recorded this whole interview like 3 days ago, and I didn't hit the record button. So me and Chaney just had a nice, long, beautiful
We
talk.
did. It was a good chat.
I was really excited about it. And then I went to start editing and realized I had no footage. And it was just one of those, such a tragedy. It's like if you lock your keys in your car and blow your tire and blow your engine all in one day type of thing. It's like, oh no.
That interview was like the Sistine Chapel, the Michelangelo.
Yeah.
You really missed out, because that was the crowning achievement of all your interviews ever. There's no way this one can live up to it, or any other one. But
it was that glorious. But if you're listening to the EOS podcast at this point still, someday maybe we'll capture that magic in a bottle again. So,
well, what am I most excited about? Well, honestly, it's the adoption. Since with CPU Emergency, we are very involved in the community. dApps recognize us now, users recognize us, but we are getting contacted by dApps that want to integrate us on their website 2-3 a week, and they're reaching out to us, not the other way around. They're coming to us and say, listen, we want to make sure our users have CPU. We're excited about EOS. So I think that we're going to see an explosion, a dApplosion, if you will, in 2019. We've got all these EOS VC funds where we really haven't seen much. Well, we got Everpedia. That's the only one we've really got right now. But we've got Mythical Games. I'm very excited about playing games on EOS. EOS Nights is great, but having some real games. We got High Fidelity, that got their 20 million. Mythical Games got 16 million. Vayon Protocol got 1 million, I think, from FinLab. So, what's that? We've got 70 million out of 1 billion EOS VC fund. I hope that's all in fiat. I hope that's all in USD, and they didn't keep any of that in Ethereum. I don't think they did. But we've got 93% of $1 billion VC fund. I think we'll start seeing some other good things come out next year. So dApps are exciting. I'm an old school gamer. I played, grew up with the Atari and the Nintendo and Super Nintendo all the way up through Ultima Online and My favorite back in the days of college, date myself a little bit, back when I was in undergrad and grad school, EverQuest. Play a lot of EverQuest. And I can just see a need for something like that on blockchain. We don't have to have every loot added to the blockchain, but maybe when you log in and log out, it saves your stats and saves your current XP and that sort of thing. And any individualized loot, then saved to the blockchain. So I think that'd be pretty cool to have a marketplace with real world implications right in the game. That'd be pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something, that we talked about in our last interview. What is interesting is this transition between the real world and the virtual world. And one of the big missing pieces is just being able to own some sort of item, something like if you have this pen in the real world, that's different from when you go to the virtual world and you have a pen and it just disappears.
Yeah.
Like if you're owning the actual items in a game, and then possibly like high fidelity, getting some of that into virtual reality as well, the lines become really blurred. So
my kids love playing Fortnite. They love playing all these different games. But I think my son actually, we had to sit down and have a long discussion about spending real money on Fortnite, and he decided he wanted to, and he got some skins, some other things that are associated with that. But it was really cool, if he could turn around in a marketplace and decide he didn't want to play Fortnite anymore and try to sell those skins or certain items in there. He could never do that, right? That's something he had interaction. I can't think the devs of Fortnite are right now. Someone will come back and tell me later, I'm sure. But that's interaction he had with that dev team to get that virtual item that he really has no ownership permission of. Once they shut down the game or they decide to change that item or take it away, he's got no control over it.
yeah, I think that this point we're at, like I think that 10 years from now, even maybe even sooner, people look back on a time when you didn't own your items and just not really even understand how that was possible. Well, why would you buy something that you didn't even own? I don't like it.
Or couldn't sell or couldn't do something with again down the future. I agree.
Yeah, you bought it just to look at it on your computer screen. I don't get it. So it's yeah.
I remember buying the very first, I think it was Diablo 1 or Diablo 2 now, I can't remember, back in the early part of 2000, online, and then having to meet somebody on the Diablo, one of the servers, and get my item that I paid $6 for back in the day. We've come so far, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. I've got High Fidelity is actually coming on to the podcast.
Great.
Probably end of this week. Yeah. So I'm really excited because High Fidelity is the team. Well, one of their team members invented Second Life, which is kind of like EverQuest, except for maybe not as quest oriented.
You're not killing orcs or anybody, I don't think, but yeah.
Just this open world where, it's a Second Life is a good, that's what it was. So I'm imagining High Fidelity trying to put something like Second Life with these ownable items within virtual reality onto the blockchain is just game changer. I can't wait to just ask 1,000 questions to them and see what's
I'll definitely tune into that one. I want you to get Mythical Games on too. I want to see what they have in the pipeline for games coming out. Hopefully they have some cool game coming out in 2019 or down in the relatively near future. I know it can take a long time to develop games, but I don't think it takes a long time to develop a game's interaction with blockchain potentially. So hopefully they have something ready to go.
Yeah, maybe they've been building some things in anticipation and just are going to connect some blockchain tools to it. And Mythical Games, I think they have some of the developers or some of the team from Blizzard and some of the big
Activision, Blizzard. Yeah, they have some pretty big names.
Yeah, so I mean, once we see a real good mainstream video game with blockchain integrated, things may start moving quickly. That'll be
it was listening to a podcast recently, and they made good points that at the end of the day, users don't want to know what the background is, what the processor is. They don't care what the website's hosted on or anything of that nature. So we don't really want them to even know that it's necessarily EOS. But we just want it to work well and work work right and easy for user adoption. So hopefully we'll see that soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like there would be no change on the user side, because right now users can own some of their items and then sell them in the Steam marketplace. It's just that what happens is the Steam marketplace has full control over those items. For one thing, they're not provably unique, so you could think you have a 1 in 10 sword and you have a 1 in 1,000 sword, or the other way around. And then the other thing is that developers can change the code and you can lose your items and lose, in some cases, people have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in value because of a change, developer change. Yeah, like World of Warcraft developer change. They push an update and then all of a sudden, you lose a ton. There was a guy who, I need to do a little bit better research on this, but he drove his Lambo down the freeway backwards somewhere in Southern California and was just had a mental breakdown because I remember that, because he lost so much money. Because he lost so much money because of a code update. So yeah, those problems. But anyway, people now can own skins and also sell them on the Steam marketplace, but it gives you provability of the uniqueness of your item and also the ability to hold on to it, whether the code changes or not. So
we got off track a little bit. What excites you, not currently, but for 2019 then?
For 2019 is the layout of updates coming, the things that Block One has, because that's what Dan mentioned in the Telegram channel lately, kind of listed off the BitShares 2.0, Steemit 2.0, the wallet, and those in the identity solution. Those things are in the Rex. These things are pretty far along in production, and they said that they're just polishing them up, making sure that legal is all good, and then releasing them. So and then there was another update last night where, as far as release order, the wallet is going to come first. And so those tools, I mean, as those release, each of those is kind of huge. So over the span of 19, I'm hoping every 2 or 3 months we get a big drop of one of those cool tools, starting with the wallet.
That would be very cool. I'm excited about that as well. I did notice though that someone asked him when there would be not a calendar, what's a roadmap essentially, and I think he said something along the lines, which kind of upset me a little bit. I think we were promised a roadmap a while back, was on the lines of why, so everybody can be upset when we don't meet the deadlines or something along those lines. I don't know if you saw that, but
I didn't miss that one.
But anyway, yeah, I'm excited for what they have to offer. They've got 100 plus devs working on it. They got a big war chest to work from. They got some really great minds from outside even the block space just to run Block One, and a huge amount of interested partners. And I think that I think good things come to those that wait. Hopefully we waited a little bit in 2019. Will show us some fruit.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun year. Hopefully it's a fun year.
Yeah, I hope so too.
If it's not a fun year, then we're getting a little behind schedule. It could be a scary year. So we'll see. Well, do you have any final thoughts for the EOS community here as we start to wrap up?
No, if you have a DApp that you want help with on CPU integration, feel free to reach out to me on Telegram at River King Fisher, or if you are a user and or a DApp, you need a little help with regards to your CPU. Our Telegram channel is CPU 911. We'll be happy to help you out. We try to make sure everybody gets what we can, and to get back to acting on the EOS network. Obviously, we give 1.5 for anybody that needs it if it helps out. But if you need a little bit more, let's say you need 3 or 4 or 5, come to us. We'll try to give you a hand. Some cases, some of our affiliates, they give out a lot more. We give up to, in some cases, 1,000 or 1,500 EOS if you're using their platform, meet certain requirements. So check that out. You can find me on Reddit. I'm also the EOS subreddit, one of the EOS subreddit moderators. It's that River Kingfisher there as well. And then Twitter, more at Moore Chaney. And that's about it. Our website's CPU Emergency. You can get CPU there as well. Check that out first before coming to the Telegram if you can. And there's also some DAP related and some CPU related websites you can check out. To, like I mentioned earlier, EOSCharge.io, Titan Labs has a good CPU related content, so you can go check that out.
Great. Well, I will link your links in the show notes so people can find that. Next, I've got Rohan from EOS Authority talking about EOS carbon footprint being carbon neutral, and then we've got High Fidelity coming on. So some interesting shows coming up. And thank you so much, Chaney. That was a fantastic talk. Learned all kinds of stuff, especially getting to go through it twice. And
you're an expert now. Thanks for having me on again.
Now. Yeah, for sure. And big shout out, man. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this a second time and having a good vibe about it. So
it was fun. It was fun both times.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure, man. I appreciate it. And we'll do this again in a quarter or so when things have changed big again. So
sounds good.
Yep. Cheers, my EOS podcast listeners. We'll see you next time. Bye.
The money is not the prime asset in life. Time is, and your time is just